All right, last time we were starting chapter 6, and they are on a field trip to the Amish farm, and he smelled the delicious shoe fly pie. And no, it's not because there are shoes or flies in it. It's because it's so sweet and sugary that the flies would want to be around it, so we'd go, oh, shoo away, flies. So that it just became the nickname shoe fly pie. Now, Joey is in the pumpkin patch. He picked a pumpkin. He wants to carve it. And the teacher just told him he cannot. So let's see what happens next. She just said, we don't want you to hurt yourself. I want to carve one too, I said. You can draw on one now, she suggested, and held out a black marker, and we'll carve it later, I promise. I want to do it now with everyone else, I said, and held the knife behind my back. Later, Mrs. Maxey said. All the moms are busy helping other kids. Now, I shouted. And my fists balled up, and I could feel that surge of energy run through me like nothing in the world was going to keep me from doing what I wanted. Give me the knife, she ordered, and held out her hand. No, I said, stepping back, then threw it as far as I could into the pumpkin patch. I think it's time for you to have a time out in the bus, she said, getting tired of me. If you can sit still for 10 minutes and calm down, you can come back here and draw on your pumpkin. Everyone else gets to carve theirs, I said, pointing to all the other kids who were busy scratching out big evil eyes and teeth with their unsharp baby knives. We just don't want any more accidents, she said, and pointed toward the bus in front of the house. Now be a good boy and go directly to the bus. I'll be watching from here, and then when you're ready to tour the barn, I'll get you. Do you think it's fair that the teacher's not letting him do some of the things the other kids are doing? Think about his history. Do you think she's just trying to keep him safe? Is that fair? I don't know. I turned around and stomped back alongside the farmhouse, and for a moment I thought I'd just keep walking all the way home and get my own knife and carve my own pumpkin. But I felt Mrs. Maxey's eyes staring at the back of my head, so I didn't. And then I passed a window and smelled that sweet pie again. I glanced back over my shoulder, and some kid was pulling on her sleeve and talking to her, so instead of walking home or going to the bus, I sneaked around the front door of the farmhouse. The quilt ladies were still working as I marched by real quick down to the kitchen. The Amish girls were out in the garden, and no one else was on guard, so I grabbed a whole shoe fly pie off the table because it popped into my head to do it. And then my feet were moving a mile a minute, and I opened a side door and headed out beyond the barn toward the cornfield. I ducked down low and ran between 2 rows of tall stalks until I couldn't see anything around me but corn plants. I sat down and I stuck my finger right into the middle of the pie, as if I were a knife, and I carved out a broken-looking Halloween face on the pie. And when I finished, I stuck my finger in my mouth. It was sweet. As sweet as the little packets of sugar I ate at Dunkin' Donuts. Sweeter, maybe. More like log cabin pancake syrup right out the bottle the way I drink it if Mom even for a second lets it stay on the counter. And the pie was almost as runny as syrup. It wasn't gelled up like the cafeteria cherry pie. So I picked off the top crust and ate that first while I stirred my finger around trying to find the shoes and the flies. But it was all just molasses, so I felt tricked but didn't know how. Then I just kept sticking to my fingers curled up in and licking them off, and the more I ate, the faster I wanted to eat it, and nothing else mattered. Not the real flies sticking to my fingers and lips, not the wind blowing through the corn stalks, not the voices overhead of kids carving pumpkins. Nothing, just eating the pie and tasting the warm sugar melt all over my tongue and ooze down into my body like a slippery, sugary snake. And when it was almost finished, I bent the tie pin in half, tilted back my head, and poured the last brown drops of it right down my throat. Now think about if anyone would eat an entire sugary pie like that, how they might feel. Now imagine how Joey feels. Then I licked the plate like a dog, and by the time I finished, my mind was a mess and my legs were pumping. I was ready to run a circle around the entire world. I had a funny sound in my head, kind of a hissing, like when the TV station goes off air at night and there's nothing but static. But really loud static and no words at all, getting louder like tires speeding down a wet road and coming right at me. My eyes felt so swollen with the flood of energy inside my throbbing head that I could see only the tops of my cheeks and smudge where my nose fit on, and a bigger blur beyond that. I took a deep breath and the air gushed into my lungs and lifted me up, and suddenly I was running and crashing through the stalks of corn. I had my arms stuck out like the wings of a plane, and the long, curved leaves sliced me up, but I didn't feel it stinging. I didn't feel my feet hit the ground. I didn't feel the jolt when I tripped forward and slammed into the corn stalks and clods of dirt with my chest and bounced right up and kept going. I was running so fast and breathing so deep that I thought I could take off up out of the cornfield and higher into the blue air and above into the clouds and look down on the farm and bus and kids and Mrs. Maxey, who would be pointing up at me. He's having a sugar rush, isn't he? Then, before I could slow down, I was suddenly running out of the cornfield, and from there I headed for the barn, where there was a huge open door. So I went inside, and I was not saying to myself, "See the ladder, climb the ladder." No, I was just climbing before I knew it, and I was way up high on the big timbers playing a crazy kind of snakes and ladders, sliding down the tilted beams and climbing others like a monkey on a coconut tree. My spring was wound so tight that I was more like a rat in a maze, without words or any feelings or any ideas about myself and what I should be doing other than going up, 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 faster and higher until there was nothing more above me but the roof and an owl, one with those big white eyes. One of those big white owls with the huge dark eyes and hooked beak, which is where I stopped. "Who?" it said. "Who?" And I answered, "Joey Pigza, that's who." "Who?" it said again, and kept its eyes right on me. And for some reason it was the same as if someone had asked me why I ate the pie and why I was all the way at the inside top of the barn. And before I knew it, my gears started shifting and all the inner energy inside me went somewhere else. Now he's having a sugar crash. I sat as still as a bookend with my chin on my knees and looked down from the rafter, and the ground was way beneath me, with 100 really small 4th and 5th graders pointing up into the air, and one of them was calling my name. It was Mrs. Maxey. Could you imagine? I would be having a heart attack right now. "Joey!" she hollered and waved her hands over her head like she was in trouble. "Joey, don't move! We're coming to get you!" And in a few minutes, the biggest ladder I ever saw was being raised up from the back of a horse and wagon. The back of a horse and wagon. And an old man with a long white beard wearing a big black hat was climbing up as if he was Santa for the Amish. "Don't worry, son," he said. "Just stay put. That owl don't bite." "Me either," I said, squeezing some words out of my brain. I stood up on both feet and began to walk the big beam, and everyone below looked so tiny and they were all yelling for me to sit down. But I didn't want to sit. It was the last thing in the world I wanted to do. I just kept walking across the huge room until below me was a pile of hay bales. And I'd seen about 1,000,000 movies of kids falling in hay and bouncing up and down and running off, so it seemed no different than playing stuntman or jumping into piles of fall leaves, so I yelled out, "Geronimo!" And I jumped. Luckily, this is not the end of the chapter. The best part was being in the air, sort of wiggling as if I was doing a hula dance or keeping from landing on my head. And when I hit the hay with my feet first, it wasn't soft like the movies, but so hard that it felt like something had landed on me instead of me landing on it. I didn't even sink into it like leaves or anything. It was more like landing on a huge pincushion, and every time I bounced down on it, I was jabbed 100 more times. But none of it hurt as much as my ankle when I tried to stand up. I must have twisted it. Instead of being able to run away, I tried to crawl, but by then another old farmer was on me. "I got him!" he hollered to those who were still to come. "Joey," Mrs. Maxey said when she came running over, "what got into you?" And then she must have seen all the molasses on my face and shirt. She put 2 and 2 together. Her face first got mad, but then when the farmer put me down on my feet and I fell over to one side because of the pain in my ankle, she got all worried again. "Let's see that ankle," she said, and untied my shoe with her nervous hands, which hurt because my ankle was a little swollen and looked more yellow than it should have. "Oh, Joey," she sighed and tried to feel for broken bones. "What are we going to do here?" "I didn't mean to get hurt. I just wanted to jump in the hay." "I know," she said. "It's just that there's always a difference between what you think you're doing and what happens to you and everyone else." I looked up, and there was Maria Dombrowski writing my name down on a pad because Mrs. Maxey had told her to keep a list of anyone who got out of line. And everyone else, teachers and parents and Amish, were all looking at me as if they were at the zoo and I was something in a cage. "I'll be okay," I said, and pulled my foot out of her hands and stood up. "But my shoe doesn't fit anymore, so they can have it for their pie." I pointed at the Amish girls, and they began to giggle and cover their mouths. Then everyone began to laugh, except for Mrs. Maxey. I don't think she got the joke. Oh, Joey, Joey, Joey.